Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today is part 2 of my high-end makeup collection. Today we're going to talk about my blushes, bronzers, highlighters, and face palettes, and maybe just give comparisons of all of them. I will link the first part of this high-end collection if you would like. I did all of my base products in that video, and then I also have another video for all of my drugstore makeup products that I will also link for you guys. With that being said, if you're new here, hi, I'm Vivian. I'm a robotics engineer with a love for all things beauty and makeup related, and I would love it if you liked and subscribed if you aren't already. And with that being said, let's just hop into it. So I have a few different types of formulas here. I have a couple liquids, a couple powders, and then a couple of cream formulas, so a good range of all of them. Let's do the cream formulas first. This first one is from Merit. This is the Merit Day Glow in the shade Citrine, and I'm gonna try and swatch all of these for you guys. So this one is a really pretty subtle shine. It looks pretty intense in the packaging, like it looks like it'd be pretty kind of orange and like too golden and maybe a little bit too deep for my skin tone, but honestly it's stunning. This is one of my favorite cream formula highlighters. It just blends out into this really pretty sheen. There's no like fuss about it. It doesn't pick up any of my like foundation underneath. I just think it's a really good product, and it is very emollient and just pretty. Like there is nothing about this that I don't like. I would maybe consider getting a different shade of this if I didn't have so many different highlighters in my collection. Like it's that good that I would buy another one. I really like this formula. I think it's really pretty, and I really like this shade especially because it is that more like golden tone. The next highlighter I want to talk about is this one from Ami Collet. This is the light catching highlighter in the shade Glaze. So this is just like a really clear glaze. For me, this is very much just like a balmy highlight with no real like glitter to it. I'm not sure if you can even see that. It's right there, but you can see the citrine one has a little bit of a base, like it's a little bit more just highlightery and shimmery in general, where this one is like very natural. This is very much just like a give yourself a little bit of a balmy glow. If you look at the packaging itself, there is like sparkles in there. They just never come across on your actual skin. Like I feel like you cannot see it on your skin whatsoever. I don't use this as much as the Merit one. Like if I were to pick one, I think I would pick the Merit one just because I prefer the way that looks. But if you are into a really natural, like no shimmer whatsoever highlight and you just want like a really pretty glow, I do like this Ami Collet one. I think it's really nice. The last cream product I have is this one from Lila B. This is the Divine Duo Lip and Cheek in the shade Bedazzling. Lila B isn't a brand anymore, but I do have this, so I am going to talk about it. This is currently in my project pan, and when I first started using this, I thought that it would be finished up pretty quickly because I thought the pans were really shallow. The pans are a little bit deeper than I thought. You can see, maybe you can see that I have a little bit of pan right now, but that's purely because I was trying to like see how much was in there, and I totally just dug my nail in there. So definitely more products than I thought. I think it's pretty. It's not my favorite cream highlighter. I much prefer the Merit one. Although it is like pretty, it just doesn't compare. I feel like it's not as easy to use. I don't love the undertone of this either. It's much more pinky, and I prefer more golden tones. This one is also just a thicker formula in general, so it just doesn't feel like it blends in as easily. I do think it has a pretty shine though. I feel like it's much more icy than the other two. This is probably my least favorite out of the 3 cream highlighters I have that are high end, but I do still like it. It's just not my absolute favorite, and Lila B is no longer a brand anymore, so I mean it doesn't really matter. Let's do liquids next. So I have 3 liquid highlighters here. This first one is from Refi. This is the gloss highlighter. It doesn't have a shade, so I think it might just only be one shade. This is really pretty if you really like a golden like glow base. You can see that's super pigmented. I do usually use this by blending it in like mixing it with a blush and blending it that way. But let me see if I can swatch it next to it. If you sheer it out, it really just leaves a pretty golden, like bronzy glow, and it doesn't look as intense. But again, like it really depends on what you're looking for in a cream highlighter or liquid highlighter type of product. I feel like this one is best suited for those that are using this like all over your face as like a primer or like a glowy base. I don't really love this as a highlighter, like a pinpointed highlighter, especially because I feel like the formula can kind of pick up my foundation underneath if I use too much or if I go in with too much. It's not my absolute favorite highlighter, but you know, I have it and it is like a little mini sample size, so I see myself being able to use it up fully. It's just not my like absolute favorite. This next one is new to me. This is the Vive Skin Dew. Again, this is a little travel size of it. This came in a set. Anyway, this is kind of the same type of vibe. The packaging is pretty similar. It's that kind of paint tube type of packaging. This one is not as bronzy as the Refy one. It's much more of a lighter gold, but again, you can kind of see it has that same kind of reflection. This one is just not as pigmented as the Refy one, so I do think they're both really pretty. This is like brand new to my collection, so I don't really have my full thoughts on it. I don't think I've tried to use this as like a pinpointed highlighter over other bases that were not the Vive one yet, so I just don't have my full thoughts on it yet. From the swatches though, it does look really pretty. This next product here is from Rare Beauty. This is the liquid luminizer in the shade Mesmerize. This is a liquid highlighter. It has a doe foot applicator. This is a very like pinky shade, pinky highlighter shade, which again, I'm not super drawn to. I typically reach for highlighters that are more gold, more bronzy. It's just more pinky, so I just don't reach for it. I do think it's a pretty highlighter though. I love the blush formula, but yeah, it's just not something I reach for super often because of the tone that it has. Next things are the 3 powder highlights I have. This first one is from Kaja. This is the Bouncy Blendable Highlighter in the shade Toy Alien. They sent this to me, and when they sent it, it got completely destroyed and came out of the packaging, so I just kind of pushed it back in there. So it's not the prettiest packaging anymore, but it still works. This is a very, very creamy formula. It just feels very smooth and velvety when you swatch it. It does have kind of like these micro glitters in there, so when you're blending it out on the cheeks, it does have a little bit of glitter, and it's more kind of like glittery than the typical like shimmery, if that makes sense. I do like the tone of this. I think it's a really pretty highlighter. The texture of it really reminds me of the ColourPop Super Shock highlighters. I don't think it has like the same effect, but the texture definitely reminds me of that. To be completely honest, I don't think I need this in my collection. I just think that I already have a lot of highlighters. I don't wear highlighter that often, especially powder highlighters, and this is still pretty new, so I feel like one of my cousins or like one of my family friends would have a more fun time using this than I would. Yeah, I think I'm gonna declutter this and give this to one of my cousins. I think they would use it a lot more than I would. The next highlighter I want to talk about is this one from M Cosmetics. This is the Sunscape highlighter in the shade Majesty. This highlighter is so pretty. It is a baked formula. This is a more intense highlighter. Even the swatch, I feel like you can see how intense it actually is. There are specific times where I do want a really intense highlighter, and when I do want that, this is usually what I reach for. It is this really pretty like rose gold shade. It's kind of coming up further on my arm, so it's kind of hard to see, but you can see that it's just much more like metallic than any of these other cream highlighters where they're more like from within. This one, I feel like you can see the visible shimmers in there. I do think it's a pretty highlighter. The formula, when you swatch it, feels very dry, but again, it is that kind of baked formula. I think the packaging is cute too. I like the gold little ring here. I like this highlighter a lot, actually. It's not my everyday vibe, and so I feel like I don't reach for it that much, and I really only reach for it when I want something that's like super intense. And lastly, I have this highlighter from Nabla. This is the Skin Glazing highlighter in the shade Privilege. This is kind of like a pinky gold, and This is also a baked formula, and I think it's really pretty. And it's not as shimmery as the M Cosmetics one. Like, it's still pretty shimmery, but just not as intense as the M Cosmetics one. So again, this one is kind of more reserved for like more glam looks for me, and you can see the differences in tones. This one is much lighter and just much more of like a champagne pink, whereas the M Cosmetics one is much deeper and more of like a, almost like a blush topper shade. All right, let's talk about face palettes. I have two face palettes here, one from Benefit and one from Charlotte Tilbury. This Benefit one is the Cheek Leaders palette. It comes with all of these different blushes and one bronzer. I'm just not a face palette type of person. I really am not. And I feel like I should be, but it just never ends up being like that. And I just want to swatch all of these for you guys so you guys can see. So it comes with the California blush, the Tickle highlighter, Hula bronzer, Dandelion blush, and Dallas blush. So this is the palette swatch. So that's California, the Tickle highlighter, Dallas blush, Hula bronzer, and then Dandelion blush. As you can see, the highlighter, it's pretty intense. It's not my preferred kind of highlighter shade variation. This peachy pink blush, California, also not really my vibe. I typically don't love peachy pinks on my skin tone. The Dallas blush is really pretty. That is one of the blushes that I really like. Hula bronzer is like a cult classic, I feel like. And then Dandelion is this really pretty, just like soft pink shade. I just don't reach for cheek palettes. I really don't. And I feel like part of the reason why cheek palettes are appealing to people are because it's like convenient, but this packaging is so bulky that it's really not convenient. I also don't really like that they include this brush. I know that they do with all of the Benefit products, but like it's a terrible brush. I never use it. Like 2 of these shades out of the 5, the California blush and the Tickle highlighter, are just not my vibe. Like I really would not use those. I would not choose to use those, especially when my collection is so big. This is kind of neglected in my collection. Like I definitely feel like I tend to reach for individual pans over a cheek palette like this. Similarly, with the Charlotte Tilbury, this is the Nude Gasm face palette. The outer packaging is really pretty. I do really like that. The inside packaging is also really pretty. The one thing that I would say is that, I mean, they're all pretty hardly pressed in this palette. Like they're not super pigmented, but sometimes I kind of like that. The highlighter in here is also really pretty. It's not super duper intense. So if I can swatch that. So this is that first shade, Love. This is a cooler contour shade. This is the Gasm part of the palette, this peach, and then this is the highlighter part. I think the formulas in here are stunning. Again, I don't love peachy pinks on me, so this is probably like my least favorite color out of the palette, but I do like these 2 kind of contoury shades, and I also do like this highlighter. I think the formulas are really pretty, but again, I don't reach for face palettes that much. All right, let's talk about bronzers. So I have a variety of different bronzers and contours here. This is the Milk Makeup contour stick, the Sculpt stick. I have mine in the shade Stoked. I think it's a really pretty contour. It blends out really easily. I think the tone of it is also really nice. The one thing about this that I think is kind of a ripoff is how small it is. This stick has 0.19 ounces. For reference, the Rare Beauty stick has 0.25 ounces, and the Merit stick has 0.44 ounces. So it's just less product. I guess it's not that much less product than the Rare Beauty stick, but the Merit one definitely has a lot more product. I think the formula is really nice though. I will say that there can be an advantage to having a stick this small, because I feel like you can be really pinpointed with where you apply it on your face if you are swiping it on your face. This one is technically a liquid. This is the Charlotte Tilbury contour wand. I have mine in the shade Fair Medium. I don't use this that much, if we're being completely honest. I mean, it is a really nice formula, don't get me wrong. It's a cult classic for a reason. I just don't tend to reach for it. You can see in this swatch that the Charlotte Tilbury one is a lot lighter than the Milk Makeup one. It is nice and cool still though. I think the formula of these are really easy to blend out. I can see why it's a cult classic. I can see why it's hyped. I do like the formula of it, but I think maybe it's a little bit overhyped. It's just not something that super excites me anymore. I know that the amount of product in here is what it's supposed to be. You have 12 milliliters of product in here, which is fine, but the packaging does come with a lot of air. When you're paying like $40+ for a makeup product, you do want it to feel full. And even though I know that technically like you're paying for how much is actually in here, that's fine, but it just doesn't feel super luxurious for when you're paying like $42, you know? The next item I want to talk about is the Cosmetics So Soft Stick in the shade Terra. This is also kind of a contour shade. This is super pigmented, so you really don't need a lot of product. Swatched here, I think this is the most like gray tone, the most cool tone out of these three contours. I do like it. I think it's a really pretty formula. I think it lasts really well. This one I do pick up on a brush and then apply it to my face on the brush because it is so pigmented. I feel like it can look a little intense if you just swipe it on your face. You really just don't need a lot of product when you're using the Cosmetics So Soft Stick. Like the tiniest dot will spread across your whole face, so you do get like a lot of bang for your buck, but it's not the most accessible. You can only get Cosmetics on their individual, like their own website. I do like it. I think it is a really nice contour. This next item here is the Tower 28 Sculptino. Even though it's described as a Sculptino, I do think it's more neutral. Like it's definitely not warm, but I don't think it counts as like a contour either. Compared to the rest of these, this is definitely the warmest shade. I do really like the formula though. It blends really easily. It's not the most pigmented, but I like Tower 28's cream formula in general. I have this Bronzino here, which you can see I have a massive pan on because I had it in my project pan for a while, and this one is a very glowy bronzer, so just for the sake of comparison in shades, like you can see that the Bronzino is almost like a bronzy highlighter versus the Sculptino. It's more of a satin finish. It's definitely cooler in undertone than the Bronzino, but they both have a really pretty formula. I really like the way they blend out, and they are pretty emollient, so they don't last the longest on your skin. But when you are kind of talking about like cream products, I don't expect super long wear time either, but I think the formulas are really pretty. I do really like them. Let's do this one next. This is the Merit Bronze Balm. This is in the shade Sen, which I think is their like middle of the road medium shade. These are very sheer bronzers. I do like the shape of this one. I feel like the shape is nice and like oval, if that makes sense. So you can like turn it on your side, and I feel like it fits in the hollows of my cheek really well. This blends out really easily, and again, since it is so sheer, like you really can never go overboard with it. You can see the undertone is much warmer than any of these contour shades right here. So I mean, it is a bronzer. It's not supposed to be a contour, but I do really like it. You can kind of see how dewy this looks on my hand, like compared to some of the other ones. This one is much more dewy and just emollient in general, so it looks just very glowy and healthy on the skin. This next item here is the Rare Beauty bronzing stick in the shade Happy Soul. This is very warm toned for me, almost even orange, so it's not my favorite shade out of all of my bronzers. I definitely think this is my least favorite. I was considering picking up another one in the shade Bright Soul, which is supposed to be a little bit more neutral in undertone. I just don't love the undertone of it. I think it just doesn't really work for my olive skin tone. I think it kind of clashes with everything, so not my favorite color, but I do like the formula. I think it blends out really easily. I like how pigmented it is. Like it's not super opaque, but it does have a nice pigment to it, and it blends out really easily. So I do like that. It's just not my favorite shade out of all of my bronzers. This is also brand new to me. This is the Vive Modern Radiance Cream Bronzer in the shade Medium. When you look at it in the packaging, right, I feel like it looks very orange, but when you actually swatch it, it does end up being a lot more neutral leaning, which I really, really appreciate. I'm not gonna lie. This, I feel like the tone of this is just slightly warmer than the Tower 28 Sculptino. Like, I feel like it has that same depth and like warmth to it. I do think this is really pretty. I have only used it like once though, so I don't have my full thoughts on the actual bronzer yet. It is emollient, but it doesn't feel as emollient as, say, like the Merit bronzing stick or the Bronze Balm or the Tower 28 ones. It has a little bit more of a like creamy formula. I don't have my full thoughts on it yet. I do really like the packaging on this though. It reminds me of a Reese's peanut butter cup. And the next product here I want to talk about is the Makeup by Mario Soft Sculpt Transforming Skin Enhancer. I have mine in the shade medium. This is also just a really, really pretty, really sheer bronzer. So when you apply this, it just gives the subtle definition, like this super pretty subtle definition. It sculpts, but it doesn't look like you're actually wearing anything. Like, I feel like I could wear this on a bare face and it would still look really pretty. You can see it is much more sheer than any of these other products, but honestly I quite like that about this product. I think it does a really good job of chiseling your face slightly. Like, I just think it's a really pretty formula. I do really like it, and I definitely don't use it as much as I should. It's really pretty. I'm a big fan of the Makeup by Mario formula. And the last cream I have is this one from Patrick Ta. This is the cream contour and powder bronzer duo in this shade She's Sculpted. So this duo comes with a cream contour and a little bit warmer of a bronzer that's a powder. So let's just swatch the contour. So this contour is really, really pretty. I do really like the way this applies. The contour shade is nice and cool toned, but it's not too cool toned where I feel like it makes me look dead. I think it just has that perfect amount of neutralness and just like opacity where it looks really, really pretty on the skin. This is one of my favorite just components in general, and I do like that you get the two products in one because of that just versatility that you have. I feel like I've made a pretty good dent in this so far. I don't think I'm anywhere close to hitting pan, but I do really like this. Let's move on to the powder cream, or the powder bronzer products I have. I only have 4. I have way more cream bronzers and contours than I do powders, but let's just start talking about it because this one from Victoria Beckham, this is the bronzing brick from Victoria Beckham. This packaging is literally so stunning. It's nice and weighty. I love this packaging. Like, it has that like metal feel to it. To open it, there's this little button where it just pops open. The whole component seems very well thought out, and the pans are refillable, so if you ever like hit pan or run out, you can just buy the refill and you don't have to buy the whole component again. But honestly, this component is so nice that I might just buy like another one to have a backup. Anyway, this has 2 different bronzing powders. One is slightly warmer than the other. Just swatching it, I think you can see that. This is in the shade 03, which the warm side is in the shade Sand, the contour side is in the shade Soul. I don't think this is a super pigmented powder. I think the formula is nice, but the tones lean a little bit too warm for me. I feel like sometimes it can look quite a bit orange. Especially if I just use the bronzer, I feel like I have to mix the two to be able to get it to work. But it's not super... It is a pressed formula and it's not super powdery. I feel like when you apply this, you can get a really good blend going. Like, it's not super pigmented right off the bat. I feel like it's a builder for sure, but I don't think you have to build it too much. I think it's a pretty formula, but the main reason why I love this so much is the packaging. I feel like the packaging is just like out of this world, unreal, very, very luxurious. And when you're paying for prices like Victoria Beckham, like, this is the type of packaging that I want to feel. And this wasn't that much more expensive than the Charlotte Tilbury. I think it might even be around the same price. So this isn't any more expensive than the Charlotte Tilbury contour wand, and this packaging just screams like luxury. You know, I love the tortoise shell. I just love Victoria Beckham's packaging in general. The next item here is the powder side of the Patrick Ta Cream Contour and Powder Bronzer Duo. This is, again, slightly more warm, but it's not super pigmented. I feel like it's very similar to this kind of cooler side of the Victoria Beckham bronzing brick, but just like slightly warmer. I do think it's really pretty though. The next item I want to talk about is also from M Cosmetics. This is the Corselet Sculpting Powder Bronzer in the shade Silhouette. This one is pretty pigmented. The shade of this looks kind of intense, and you definitely get a lot of bang for your buck. You can see this one is much more cool toned than any of the other products we've talked about, but I think it's a really pretty formula. You don't need a lot of pressure on your brush to pick any of this up. Like, it's definitely a little bit too pigmented for my personal taste, so I feel like to apply this, the best method for me is like a really fluffy brush. But I do think this is a stunning formula. I think it blends out really easily when you do go in with the right amount, and it has just like a little bit of a, I don't know, like a luminosity to it. There's something about this that just makes me feel like very sculpted. And then lastly, this is the Nabla Skin Bronzing in the shade Soft Revenge. This is also a cooler tone shade. This is a baked formula. This is currently in my project pan, so this is definitely the one product that I have the most progress on. I've almost completely rubbed off the indentation from where Nabla logo was, but this is also just a really pretty contour-like shade. It's pretty similar to the M Cosmetics in terms of tone and depth. I think if I were to pick out of the two, I would prefer the Nabla one, just because I feel like with the baked formula, it's not as easy to go overboard, whereas I feel like with the M Cosmetics one, if you're really not careful, it builds super quickly and it just starts off super pigmented. I just wish it was a little bit less pigmented, and I feel like with the Nabla one, it is more of a builder, and I feel like you have more control when something is like hard pressed like this, where you know, it doesn't have a lot of powdery kick up to it. We have a lot of blushes to get through here. This is definitely one of my biggest categories, and you know, I have a lot of repeat formulas in different shades, so I'm gonna try and talk through those at the same time. I mean, you can just see that I have quite a bit here. Let's just get into it, because this is going to take a little bit. The first two I want to talk about are my Dior Rosy Glow blushes. I have two of them here. I have one in the shade 001 Pink, which is this really cool tone pink, and I have the shade Cherry, which is 015. You can see how much I've used 001 Pink. This is one of my all-time favorite blushes. I have been in a huge cool tone pink blush vibe lately. I mean, if you have been here on my channel whatsoever in the past like month, you would know that. I feel like I talk nonstop about it. I think these blushes are really stunning, and even though they are pretty vibrant colors, the formula itself is very sheer and like pretty hard pressed. And again, I feel like when things are hard pressed, it just is easier to build up the color rather than being too pigmented where you have to try and take it away. So swatching it, this is 001 Pink and this is 015 Cherry. Like, even though they are such bright colors, they translate on the skin so beautifully. I do love both of them. The packaging, I think, is also just kind of cute. Like, it's not anything revolutionary, it's not super heavy or anything like that, but I do just like both of them. I think they're both stunning. Like, one of my all-time favorite formulas, and just vibes in general. Like, I feel like when I use these, I just feel so much more luxurious, bougie. It's honestly just such a good formula, and you can see that they did change the packaging just a little bit. The new blushes feel slightly heavier than the old blushes, and just the writing on the top changed. So the new ones has Dior in all caps, the old ones have it in lowercase, but it's that same kind of type. These are honestly just really pretty though. One of my favorite blush formulas for sure. So I want to talk about this next blush in kind of the same breath because this is also one of those cool toned pinks. This is the Persona Super Blush in the shade Bubble. Again, if you've been here for any amount of time, I'm sure you guys are sick of listening to me talk about it. This is very, very similar to the Dior blush. I just think they're really pretty. I really like this tone on me. I think it looks super bright and fresh. The Persona one is more affordable than the Dior ones, and if you don't want to spend like Dior prices, I think the Persona Super Blushes are around $25 and the Dior blushes are around $40. So that's still like a $15 saving there, and you get a really similar shade, finish, things like that. It's also not super pigmented, so it blends out really, really nicely on the skin. The next blush I want to talk about is this one from M Cosmetics. This is the Heaven's Glow blush in the shade Rococo. It's also a baked formula. It is very neutral in undertone, which I really like. It is quite pigmented, but it also has this really pretty just like sheen to it. I think this is a stunning formula. I really like this as a kind of like blush transformer. Like I feel like if I go too heavy on a super bright blush, I like this on top to kind of tone it down a little bit. I like the glow that this has as well. I think it just has a really pretty sheen to it, and the packaging again is like a little bit bulky but also kind of cute, and I like the monochromaticness of it. I think it's a really pretty formula, and even though this is a baked blush, it is quite pigmented, and I feel like you can be pretty heavy with it, so I recommend a fluffy brush when applying this. The next two powder blushes I want to talk about are these two from Cover FX. This first one is in the shade Warm Honey, and I also have the shade Spiced Cinnamon. So this is Warm Honey. It's this really pretty, just like, it is a little bit peachy, but not nearly as peach as some of the other blushes, not nearly as like bright peach. It's more of like a rosy peach, which I appreciate. And these blushes I really like because it does have those two different shades. It has a matte shade and a shimmer shade. This is the first blush formula that I fell in love with. They're very pigmented, but again, I just love the effect it has. So this first duo here is Warm Honey, and then this duo here is Spiced Cinnamon. I think these are both stunning in the summer as well, especially if you want a super glowy blush look. I just think the tones are very much like sunburnt blush tones. So I just overall think this palette is stunning. I like that you have the versatility to choose if you want it to be matte or glowy or do like a little mix of both. I just think they're stunning formulas. I feel like Cover FX got discontinued for a little bit, but I think they're coming back. But I think they're coming back in like not the best way. I think I saw that they were releasing a new foundation on their website, and the shade range did not look very good, to be honest. I've never tried any of their other products besides these blush duos. I did have a bronzing duo at one point, but it was too deep for me, so I ended up decluttering it. And the last powder blush I have is this one from Vive. This is in the shade Cherub. This is pretty much brand new to me, so I don't have my full thoughts on it yet, but I do think it's a really pretty pink blush. I mean, you guys know I've been super into pink blushes lately, and I never used to be. It is just this warm kind of like strawberry pink, and it's not like as cool toned as any of the like cool toned pink blushes that I have are. I just think it's really pretty. I think it sits really well on my skin as well, but again, I've only used it like a couple times, so I don't know exactly how I feel about it. And this last powder blush is from Surat Beauty. This is the Artistique blush in the shade Classique. This was sent to me. I just received this, and I have only used this a couple of times so far. The shade of this is such a pretty kind of watermelon pink type of color. Like, it's just a little bit deeper than the Vive blush, but it's still kind of that like rosy pink plum goodness. I really like the shade of that. I think the powder is really creamy as well. Like, I feel like it feels very smooth and refined. I don't really love this packaging though. I feel like the packaging seems cheap, and Surat Beauty is not a cheap brand. Surat Beauty is actually quite expensive, so I just wish they had a different component for their blush. I do think the blush is pretty though. I just, you know, like it's not the best packaging out there. My arm has become a little bit stained, so bear with me. Let's get into all of the cream and liquid products that I have here. Let's do creams first because I feel like the liquids are gonna stain. The first one I want to talk about is this one from Westman Atelier. This is such a pretty blush. The formula is not super emollient. It does have a nice little bit of like give to it. It is quite pigmented as well. I really like the packaging of this. It has this magnetic closure that just feels very, very luxurious. I also kind of just like the color of the packaging, which I am glad, because when I buy high-end makeup, I really want it to feel luxurious and I want it to feel like what I'm paying for is worth it. I think the blush itself is stunning, and again, I really like the packaging. I think this color is also just really pretty and fun, especially in the springtime. I feel like this is a very springtime blush for me. The next cream blush I want to talk about is this one from M Cosmetics. This is the So Soft Stick in the shade Bitten. It is this stunning, really deep, almost cranberry shade. I think that shade is so pretty. I love this in the winter because it kind of gives me that like frostbitten type of look. I think it's so pretty. It is so pigmented, so you really don't need a lot of product. The M Cosmetics formula, like I said when I was talking about the contour, is just one of those products that you should pick up on a brush and apply that way instead of swiping directly on your face, because it's just so pigmented that it's gonna kind of move around your foundation if you draw it on your face and try to blend it out that way. I do really like that formula though. This blush is pretty much one of my go-tos for the winter especially. I just love that shade for me in the winter. This next blush is from Persona. This is the Blush Multi-Stick in the shade Bubble. Again, that cool tone pink that I'm obsessed with. Definitely not as pigmented as the other two. This formula is also just more emollient in general, so I feel like it doesn't last super well, and I feel like it can pick up my foundation if I swipe with it too much or too hard. So it's not my favorite cream blush formula out there, but I love the shade Bubble. If I were to pick between the cream and the powder though, I would definitely choose the powder. The cream is just not my favorite formula. This is from Victoria Beckham. This is the Cheeky Posh blush in the shade Fever. It's this really bright red orange shade. I think this is stunning. I really don't reach for this that much because that shade is so bright and orange. I feel like this could be a good alternative to the Nude Sticks Picante blush because I don't really support Nude Sticks as a brand. This blush is so stunning. Again, the packaging of Victoria Beckham just feels really nice. It's nice and weighty. This doesn't have a magnetic closure, which is kind of unfortunate, but it does have a nice like click feeling to it when you close it, which is again kind of just like an added little luxury. I think the formula of this is really pretty as well. It's not too pigmented, it's not too sheer and emollient either. I just think it's like a really good cream formula, and I would consider picking up one of these in a different shade to use it more often. I just like that shade is just not my typical shade. It's very much like a chili pepper, and I am much more of a cotton candy blush type of person. This is the Merit Flush Balm Cheek Color. This is in the shade Mood, which is this really pretty berry shade. You can see it's, again, much sheerer than any of the other blushes. The shade is stunning, especially in the winter, like I said, and also in the winter I do want like that kind of dewier look because my skin is usually so dry, and I really like that color on me. I think it's a really pretty berry shade. It is slightly more like purple than the M Cosmetics So Soft Stick in the shade Bitten. I just think it's a stunning formula. Definitely very emollient and not the longest lasting. So, I mean, take that into consideration as well. But I do really like this color. I think it's really pretty, and I do like the blush formula from Merit. Alternatively, I have this one from Danessa Myricks. This is the Yummy Skin blush. This is in the shade Dancing Queen, and this is a very pigmented, bright, kind of purple shade, like a fuchsia shade. When I picked this up, I thought it would be more berry tone, but it is indeed more of a bright purple. It's the shade right here, almost like pink leaning. I do like the formula of this. I just have to be really careful with it because it is so pigmented and because it is such a deep color. I feel like it can look a little bit clown-like very quickly. I do like it. It's just not my absolute favorite formula. It doesn't feel super emollient. Like, it just feels, it feels balmy but not emollient, if that makes sense. I think it's a pretty blush. It's just not one of my go-tos, and that color is just not something that I reach for very often. The next blush I want to talk about is this one from Rare Beauty. This is one of their melting blushes in the shade Nearly Neutral. I really like the packaging of this. I think it's just really cute. I like the millennial pink. I like the magnetic closure it has. It just kind of looks like an oyster for some reason to me. This blush is super emollient, but when you blend it out, it feels powdery. It's not a super pigmented blush. It's definitely on the sheerer side, but I do like the color of this. I think it's really pretty, especially if you're going for more of like that no makeup look. I think it is stunning, and out of all of the other cream blushes that I just swatched, it's definitely the most like wearable everyday shade. The next blush I want to talk about is this one from About Face. This is the Cheek Freak blush in the shade Champagne Room. It's kind of this peachy pink watermelon shade. It is quite emollient. It feels very similar to the Rare Beauty blush, where it just kind of like feels like a powder as you blend it out. This shade is also a little bit more neutral leaning, not as bright when you actually do blend it out. I think it's a pretty blush. I have only used this a handful of times. I didn't even get you the swatch. This is the swatch right here. I've only used this a handful of times, to be honest. I think it is pretty. It is very sheer, and it takes like a very long time to build up to the level of pigment that I would like. So not my favorite formula. I do think the shade of it is pretty though. I just think that I have a lot of blushes in my collection, and I don't think that it's anything like revolutionary. So these two blushes, these are newer launches from Makeup by Mario. These are the Soft Pop Plumping Blush Veils. I have two shades. I have Rose Crush and Pinch Me Pink. Pinch Me Pink is another kind of brighter pink shade. So let me swatch it. Not super cool toned, like not as cool toned as the Rare Beauty blushes, but still a really pretty, just vibrant pink shade. And then the shade Rose Crush is definitely a little bit more of my go-to shade, where it's just like a rosy kind of, like a darker little rosy shade. I think this formula is really pretty. I really like the kind of dewiness that it has to it. Like, it just looks really pretty on the skin. It does have a nice amount of pigment to it as well, so it doesn't take super long to build up. I just think it's a really good formula, and it's the same formula as the Skin Enhancer, which I really like as well, and it just leaves your skin just looking very fresh and like dewy without being overly dewy or without being like glittery whatsoever. The next blush here is from Phytosurgeons. This is the Skin Spark in the shade Sublimate. This is also one of my like go-to kind of blush colors, where it's kind of that rosy kind of darker berry tone, like kind of like a sunburnt blush shade. But this one is not as rosy. It's a little bit more like mauvey and purple, but this formula is so good. It is so pigmented, but it is also emollient, so I feel like it just blends so easily. Phytosurgeons is an indie brand, and I have one of their cream eyeshadows that is absolutely stunning. It's one of my favorite kind of eyeshadow topper shades. I think Phytosurgeons as a brand has really interesting launches. I have a couple more cream blushes. These two are from Rose Inc. These are the lip and cheek colors. I have two shades here. I have Foxglove and Ophelia. Foxglove, again, is that kind of sunburnt, ready tone blush, and then Ophelia is also just a like neutral leaning pink. I have hit pan in the Ophelia shade. This was in my project pan for quite a while. I think this blush formula is stunning. It is nice and pigmented without being too pigmented. It is a thicker formula, which I feel like makes it last a little bit longer on the skin. The Phytonutrition formula is also just a little bit thicker, so I feel like it just has such a long wear time. I like the shades of both of these as well. I haven't used Foxglove as much as I probably should because I do love that shade. I have just been so focused on my Rare Beauty liquid blush that pretty much all of my other cream blushes have just faded to the background. I am so determined to finish my Rare Beauty liquid blush, and so I just haven't used this, but this is one of my favorite blushes and one of my favorite blush formulas. I think it's stunning. You can see I did hit pan on one of the shades, so I feel like that's indicative of how much I do actually like this. The next blush here is from Lila B. This is the Lip and Cheek Duo in the shade Be Fearless. So this is that really bright red. It kind of seems like intimidating, but when you blend it out, it's so pretty and soft. I feel like this would be perfect for that like tomato girl look or like that strawberry girl look. I mean, I don't know why I'm raving about it so much. It's no longer available, but I do like the blush formula a little bit more than I like the highlighter formula. The highlighter one is just a little bit too shimmery and icy, but the blush formula is nice and pigmented without being too pigmented. It has a nice kind of emollients to it. It's not super emollient and it doesn't look super heavy on my skin. It's a shame that you can't get this formula anymore because I do like it. I also do like the packaging of this. I think this is a really pretty blush. I am a big fan. Let's talk about this one first. This is the Patrick Ta Double Take Cream and Powder Blush in the shade Shiso LA. So it has the cream and powder similar to the bronzer and contour duo. This is also a more bronzy formula. Just like in terms of color, you can see it's just much more bronzy and like nude compared to some of the other blushes in my collection. I love the way that it looks. I think it's just so pretty. You can wear either on its own, you can wear them together. Patrick Ta kind of says to use the powder first and then put the cream on top. I have used that method maybe once or twice, and I do really like the way it looks. It kind of, putting the cream on top just kind of adds that life back to your cheeks. It doesn't look super powdery. I just really like the blush and the blush formula. I have considered picking up another shade of it. I did used to have a different shade in the shade Do We Know Her, but again, that's like that peachy shade that I'm not super obsessed with. So I ended up decluttering that one and giving that one away to a friend. They have so many beautiful shades now that I would highly recommend finding one, picking one up. I just think the formula is really good, and you know, I feel like you can't go wrong with it. If you find a color that you really like, I really feel like you would like both formulas and just the overall vibe of the brand, because I think it is really stunning. And lastly, these are all of my liquid blushes. So I have two from Rare Beauty. I have a couple like random brands. The first one I want to talk about is this one from Charlotte Tilbury. This is the Beauty Light one in the shade Pinkasm, and I quite literally don't get the hype with this product. I think it can be pretty. However, I hate that color on me. I don't like this pink on me. I don't know what it is about it, but I feel like it makes my skin look kind of sick. I don't like how glowy it is, and I have no issues with the glowy blush. I do like a glowy blush, but this one is just too much for me, and it is so expensive. Honestly, this is one of like my regrets in makeup purchases. I don't regret a lot of things, but I do regret this. It just doesn't work for me. I can't seem to declutter it though because it was so expensive. Let's do these two blushes next. These are from Rare Beauty. These are their soft pinch liquid blushes. I have the shades Joy and Happy. Joy is this peachier shade. This is in my Project Pan eye, and this is the shade Happy, which is a brighter pink. This is brand new to me. I just got this in a little Sephora set. It came with this and one of their glossy lip balms, but these two shades, I like the formula of these a lot. I think the formula is really nice and pigmented, but it's not super pigmented. At this point, I figured out my favorite way of applying it, and that's the way that really works for me. Like for me, I put it in the palm of my hand and then swirl my brush in and then apply it to my cheeks. But lately, since this has been so, it's not less pigmented, but I'm just picking up a lot less product because it's nearing the end of its life. I have been applying this directly to my cheeks and then immediately going in with a stipple brush, and I really like the way that looks too. And it's not as finicky and it's not as messy as like putting it in your palm. But that's what those two shades look like. I think they're really pretty, and I like the shade Happy a lot. I think that's pretty much like right up my alley at this point. The next blush here is also from Surratt. They also sent me this. This is the Artistique Liquid Blush in the shade Classique. This blush has this sponge tip applicator similar to the Charlotte Tilbury one, but it doesn't dispense evenly across the sponge. Like the Charlotte Tilbury one gets kind of everywhere, and you can see like it just spreads into the brush nicely, whereas this one, it only kind of goes to this one little point where the hole is, and I feel like because of that it just doesn't spread onto your skin easily, and then it annoys me. This is also a really sheer blush. Even though it does look kind of intense, the sponge applicator on this one specifically just doesn't work. And it is sheer, so when you apply it to your face, like it even though it looks kind of pigmented and scary in the packaging, when you apply it, it's honestly not bad. It ends up being to the point where like you can almost barely see it, but I think the formula is pretty if you prefer a sheer blush. I think the application method of this is just not worth it, and it doesn't really make sense to me. You know, Surratt again is such an expensive brand, and if you watched my first video in the series, the foundation also has a brush that I just don't think really makes sense in terms of application. So not my favorite packaging. The formula is pretty if you like a really sheer blush, but it's not anything like revolutionary either. I don't think it's really worth it. The next blush here is the Glossier Cloud Paint. This is in the shade Storm. This is a really pretty deeper kind of terracotta-y shade, which I think is super pretty on my cheeks especially. It's very similar to like Phytosurgeon Sublimate. This formula is really pretty. It does sheer out quite nicely, so even though it does look pretty pigmented, like it's really blendable, and you really don't need a lot of product. I do like it. It's like kind of the original cream blush type of formula. It's really lightweight. It's not super creamy, or it's not like super liquidy, so you do get a nice kind of hold to it, if that makes sense. And I think it's really pretty. I really like this, but since the shade is kind of darker, I mainly reserve this for more like fall winter days, and I don't really use it in the summertime that much. Next is this blush from Youthforia. This is the BYO blush oil. This is a color changing blush. So in the tube it looks green, but when you actually swatch it, it turns into this really pretty like pink shade. It's very lightweight. It feels a lot just like a very lightweight like kind of gel color. It's not super pigmented though, so this is more for your kind of no makeup days, but I think it does have a nice little sheen, and I like the color changingness factor of it. I typically like the shade of pink that color changing products turn to, but I know not everyone does, and I think the blush is just like a little bit more fun. Like there's something about it that just kind of brings me a little bit of joy. I think the packaging is pretty cool too. They do make non-color changing formulas, I believe, so if you aren't a super big fan of the pH changing type of products, they do have just like solid colors. I don't know how those perform, but if it's like a similar type of vibe, it's probably also pretty sheer but really pretty. And the last item here is this one. This is the Benefit Benetint. This is not a new product whatsoever. This is a cheek and lip stain type of product. I like this color a lot on my cheeks and my lips. It's a very thin formula. Both of these are very thin formulas. It does stain pretty well, but I do feel like this kind of catches on to any imperfections on your cheek or your face or whatever. So I feel like this one is a little bit gimmickier, just a little more finicky, I should say. I do think it's pretty though. I like the color it has a lot. It does have a good lasting stain power, and I do like that you can use it on your face and your lips if you want one of those like monochromatic vibes. I like this a lot. It does have a fragrance to it, and it's pretty strong, honestly. So if you're like applying it to your lips, you might not really like it. It's not my favorite fragrance in the world, but it's not anything super bad either. Like, it's just kind of there. So that is it in terms of all of my highlighters, blushes, bronzers, and cheek palettes. I am gonna do one more video of this type of style going through my entire collection for all of my lip products, eyebrow products, single shadows, things of that nature. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a like and subscribe if you aren't already. I hope this was helpful. I hope you guys enjoyed just seeing comparisons and just swatches of everything. This is a pretty large collection. I definitely don't think it's like the largest out there, but it is pretty large, and I do feel like I have a good range of different products, formulas, brands in general, so I think my collection is pretty good, pretty versatile, so I'm pretty happy with my collection. I really don't see anything here that I blatantly want to finish or declutter. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next one. Bye guys!